John Moravec. I am the founder of Education Futures, which is a consultancy, or you could say a small laboratory that's exploring new futures for education, how we can do things differently. Especially since the pandemic, I've been working with United Nations agencies quite a bit, consultancies and various projects around the world. Lately doing a lot of focus on educational technology. So it's kind of like futures of education and educational technology. I also have some ideas I'd like to share. So I've written a few books. One is in Spanish called Aprendizaje Invisible from over like maybe a dozen years ago, and also Nomad Society, and also the principal author of Manifesto 25, which I think we're talking about today. Other thing I do on the academic side is I'm editor-in-chief of On the Horizon, which is published by Emerald, and it's soon to be retitled Learning Futures and Emerging Technologies as an academic journal. So just really trying to push how we can get ourselves towards a future a little bit better by being more innovative in our uses of technology, etc. So good to see you guys.
Muchas gracias, John. Bueno, bienvenido a nuestro espacio de docentes en línea, que estamos aquí con Silvia Enríquez, que nos va a ayudar también en esta entrevista. Vos conocés que somos una comunidad de docentes que está trabajando con la enseñanza en línea y que compartimos muchas preocupaciones con estas actividades que tú realizas. Y tengo entendido que, bueno, y que vos compartís también esta idea que en muchos de nuestros países el modelo educativo sigue todavía el modelo de la preparación para la fábrica del siglo XVIII. Y en un mundo de transformación digital y obsolescencia de conocimiento, esta forma de educación tiene que ser transformada. ¿Cómo crees que la educación en línea puede ayudar a cambiar este formato de educación para la fábrica? ¿Y cómo podemos preparar desde la educación en línea a los alumnos para un futuro que está en constante transformación y que seguramente sea incierto?
So you're passing that question on to me. Okay. I was hoping you guys would jump in with your own ideas first. Because I think that this is really where the key is on things, because we have to get back to basics. So much of what we have in education is built on assumptions. And we're talking about online education. I think that oftentimes we're framing around old assumptions. So we're not asking what online education is, but we need to start thinking about what it could be. And unfortunately, I think that for many of us, we're starting this after inheriting a lens that is really designed to meet the needs of an era that doesn't even exist yet. This 18th century model to create obedient factory workers and bureaucrats and soldiers, which unfortunately for government ministers in my country as well, it's too easy to understand and envision, but not really for creating the jobs of the future, where we don't know what that work would be, where we need to be really focused on more skills-based, as we're faced in, confronting the rise of automation and explosion of knowledge. They're just really making the conditions for maintaining the past viable anymore. So I think when we look at online education, because now we've got access to these different tools and stuff, we need to start thinking about how we kind of break out of these older paradigms of meeting the needs of the older system to think of how we can cultivate learning systems that are more dynamic, adaptive, really embrace humanity. And I think that's kind of like a challenge in there, because when we're talking about online tools or online systems, oftentimes the technology gets in the way and we think that that's being less human. But the reality is that technology enables us to be human. It defines us. Like, I just got a pair of glasses, right? This is technology. This this technically makes me a cyborg. We use watches, we cook, and if we hadn't started cooking, our brains would have remained smaller, and we wouldn't have been able to develop as humans. So we're intrinsically tied to this. And so I think that we start thinking about this within the paradigm of online education, digital education, that we really need to then go back to the basics and start to rethink on how we can reinvent education, what it's for, what it's about, for whom it's designed to serve, and where we really want to go with this.
Bien, la segunda pregunta va asociada a la idea, que también es una idea tuya muy, muy central, que es la idea de desaprender todo esto que tal vez hemos aprendido en un formato, nuevamente, para la fábrica del siglo XVIII. ¿Cómo hacemos para desaprender, o cómo es posible que podamos desaprender, incluso nosotros mismos que estamos enseñando a alumnos que tienen que estar preparados para la incertidumbre?
That's a really good question. I think that, just echoing what you just said, I think that one of the most important skills that we can develop, both as educators and as learners, because let's not forget about teachers as well, is the ability to unlearn. Recognizing that what we know or what we think we know, that may no longer serve us, right? It really ties together in letting go of rigid assumptions or outdated practices, or these sort of comfortable routes or ways of doing things that we built for a completely different time. So I think that for us as online educators, our relevance depends on our willingness to evolve, right? Not just adopting to new tools, but to really challenging our own mental models in how we are approaching things, right? Because technologies are changing daily, and especially as we're seeing with the rapid emergence and trampling of AI within educational spaces, this impacts us cognitively, impacts us culturally, and I think that for those of us who have to prepare people for the future, right? Things are changing so fast, we don't know what the future is going to be that we're preparing people for. So developing a skill set that's within unlearning, it makes a lot of sense. So the question is, so how do we do it? I think that the first thing is just to model it as teachers. Like, we can't teach what we don't practice, right? So if we want our students to unlearn or relearn, etc., we also need educators that can embody these skill sets as well, that can confront ambiguity, they can iterate their thinking, or everything is like in a continuous beta maybe, and admit also when sometimes things don't work. It's hard to do as educators when we're wrong or what we know isn't the right answer or the right way anymore. So we need to show what we're learning, how we're learning along the way, and also our discomfort with change as well. The other one is that we need to design more of educational systems and but programs, etc., for this sort of uncertainty as well. So I think this means that we need to start to get away from building for rigid or fixed content. Some content areas are rigid and fixed. I think that most of what we deal with in the real world is not rigid and fixed, is changing so much. So we need to really focus on designing learning experiences that prepare learners to adapt. The third one, I would say, rewarding curiosity over compliance, right? That within every level of education, until you go to get a PhD level, when you're asked, so what do you want to do? And then you're allowed to be curious. Every other thing is about compliance. You got to do this and this stuff. You've got tests. You have to meet these standards, etc. And so we reward people for getting it right, but when we don't know what all the answers quite are, this creates a real friction here, right? So I think that real relevance comes from really understanding what's going to come next and being willing to explore what comes next as well. And so I think this pushes us as educators to really create these new environments. And in online spaces, digital spaces, I think there's some tremendous opportunities in that. And then the fourth one, because I like bring things back, is that we need to have these sort of spaces for reflection as well, because unlearning doesn't quite happen automatically. It requires a lot of reflection, right? And this sort of understanding of what works and what doesn't work, or metacognition of knowing what we don't know, what has been working, right? So we need to build this more into our practice, as it doesn't have to be like reflection the traditional way that we've been doing it, but we need to find ways to create authentic feedback loops. So I think that ultimately, when you're integrating these four principles, that continuous learning isn't really a technical challenge, but it's more of a human one in anything. It challenges us to challenge our assumptions about education and learning, and really bringing human values that are centered on humility, courage, trust, and loving ourselves and others in our communities, right? Because in the digital age, we all have access to information. Artificial intelligence is helping us to convert that into better knowledge. So it's really not about a race to be who knows the most, but who's really willing to learn and learn again and adapt and thrive.
Y una reflexión a partir de tu respuesta, John, es generalmente con las tecnologías, con nuevas tecnologías, los innovadores suelen ser gente más joven, gente que está aprendiendo. En muchos casos, como docentes, aprendemos de nuestros alumnos que están innovando con tecnologías. ¿Crees que esto es así? ¿Los alumnos como innovadores están más cerca de los cambios tecnológicos?
I wouldn't place it on being focused on technological change, but I think that this is more of a social reorientation. I think that the needs of the workforce have changed. Societies have changed quite a bit. And we're at a point where we just simply need more innovators. And at the same time, we have more resources to support innovation. As in the past, I think that we've been really good at crushing it or controlling it. But now I think we've got more tools and resources to make things happen. And so it's almost like cultural software or mindware, if you will, to make these sort of, to make this jump.
Bien, hay una palabra que también nos gusta mucho, que es la de nomads.
And you
de aquellos
froze.
que...
I think my internet connection is gone bad.
No,
Oh, yeah.
Ahí estoy, perdón, fue mi conexión. Hay una palabra, John, que me gusta mucho, nos gusta mucho con Silvia, que es la de nomads, aquellos que se van, tienen que ir cambiando y adaptándose e ir todo el tiempo moviéndose en su conocimiento, en su creatividad, porque no pueden quedarse quietos, still, con un solo tipo de conocimiento, porque la sociedad va cambiando, como tú decías, a velocidades increíbles. Y esta idea de la creatividad, la adaptabilidad, la innovación, ¿cómo hacemos nosotros como docentes para no quedarnos con un solo modelo tecnológico de educación? ¿Cómo hacemos también nosotros como educadores para ser también nómadas del conocimiento?
I think that's a really good question, and it also relates to the previous one when we talk about unlearning, because nomads are knowledge workers who can work anytime, any place, and just about anywhere with about anybody, right? It's about using our individual knowledge to create new value within organizations or solve problems, right? So I think that if we accept that the future of work belongs to nomads, and the future of learning as well belongs to nomads, then our systems just need to be really reimagined you know, in this collaboration point, in the reflection point, the collaboration point for adaptability that's really focused on, creating value and creating new value across different contexts is what really matters. So they're boundary solvers, they're problem solvers, or boundary crossers, problem solvers. They learn life throughout their own lifetime, right? And these are things that we should start seeing reflected also within teachers. Yet most of online education throughout the world that I've been, witnessing or been involved in, it really mirrors the industrial classroom. That's very rigid, it's hierarchical, and it's standardized. So I think that what we need to do to really foster this sort of nomadic skills development, I would say with teachers as well as students, is that we really need to focus on more creativity through open-ended problem solving, right? And Ken Robinson was really famous decades ago by talking about creativity in schools and how we need that. And there's a pathways question in this, because if you had a room of people and asked them, well, okay, who's against creativity? Right? Nobody would raise their hands, right? Everyone wants creativity, but there's a question of, so how do we do it, right? I think that a great way for this is through open-ended problem solving, because nomads, as a skill, they really thrive through ambiguity. So I think that online education should really focus on real-world challenges over, the old rote tasks or the pre-programmed tasks that are in there. Giving learners problems that don't quite have one correct answer, and also the tools to enable them to find their own answers, right? And follow their own passions. And together with this is that we need to enable more adaptability through nonlinear pathways, right? Because there isn't one way of doing things, or too often with online education, things are set up in a Moodle where we've got module 1 has to is followed by module 2 by module 3. But nomads and human beings in general don't follow one-size-fits-all trajectories for learning. I think it makes sense to look at from a management perspective, and they're able to present things like so this is our plan. But we really need to enable learners to co-design their own learning paths. So I think we look at online tools, various digital tools. We need a very urgent redesign to bring learners and teachers together in a way that's more collaborative, more flexible, and also much more meaningful as well. Nomads learn in networks, and they collaborate within networks too. So it's just a reflection that learning isn't something that we do solo. It's not a solo act, but we learn as we traverse networks. So we need to start thinking about these learning hubs or platforms that we use as hubs for creative collaboration, and just going really beyond like discussion boards or assignment submission mechanisms, or the occasional Google Meets meeting, right? So we need co-authoring, peer feedback, hackathons, cross-cultural exchanges. Think of like virtual study abroad, towards building more authentic communities of practice and not digital silos. Because I think that so much of what we built really reflects the industrial thing where, learning has a start time and an end time. You log in, you log off. And I think that's a very dangerous way to present online learning. And then getting back to unlearning, right? The fourth thing, to bring things back full circle, is creating, reflective ecosystems with that, right? Because, as I said before, it doesn't have a start time and an end time. You don't just graduate from learning. We learn all the time. That's the main task that our brains do. It's learning and solving, right? So we need to find ways to embed more continuous feedback, journaling, peer mentoring, whatever, or portfolio-based assignments that go beyond what we do within, the confinements of formal education. So we really want to encourage learners to update, revisit, or really remix their work as they grow. So I think for us as educators, and also as we're training educators, right? We need to step away from the idea, and I'm sure we can all agree that we need to step away from the idea that learning doesn't happen by controlling every outcome. I think that we all pretty much agree to that. But in practice, what do is that we control every outcome.
Yes.
So we need to just think of ways in how we can design better for agency, curiosity, and relevance, because online education should not be a delivery mechanism that just builds new boxes, but it needs to be much more of a laboratory, a space for becoming, enabling people to create things that are just truly beautiful and reflective of what they want to do and who they want to become.
Silvia, ¿alguna pregunta para cerrar esta primera parte de la entrevista?
No, más que una pregunta, es que estoy pensando un montón de cosas mientras te escucho, John, y este último tema que tiene que ver con la evaluación, que ya sabes que es una preocupación mía, es muy cierto que no basta con cambiar la mentalidad sobre cómo aprendemos y enseñamos, sino que después hay que tener un criterio de evaluación de alguna manera, de que la gente aprendió algo, que también haya evolucionado con respecto a todo esto, sobre todo porque por el momento las instituciones lo piden. Yo en la universidad he tratado de hacer un montón de cosas que no son la educación rígida y tradicional de repetición de conocimientos, pero después el reglamento dice que tengo que tomar exámenes. Entonces, es importantísimo que logremos cambiar esto por algún mecanismo fehaciente para las instituciones, porque de lo contrario, a la hora de la evaluación deshacemos lo que tratamos de hacer antes. Y es más, antes no nos prestan suficiente atención porque los alumnos saben que lo que va a venir después es el examen de siempre y lo van a tener que hacer. Entonces, eso es algo que es integral a todo esto, ya lo has dicho, está en el manifiesto, pero es una de las cosas importantes a la que no sé si se les presta tanta atención como a cómo podemos fomentar la adquisición de conocimiento. Este es el paso final que también tiene que evolucionar mucho. Eso es una de las muchas cosas que se me ocurrió escuchar.
You know what? I think it's really good reflection. Let me just bounce back one thing that I think that just really brings what you're talking about home, makes it real. The changes we've been experiencing over the last couple of years have been phenomenal, and not just within the universities, but also in primary and secondary education. We've been telling people you need to learn STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. If you don't know how to code, you will not succeed in the future, right? And we've been really focused on that. Now we have artificial intelligence, which writes code for us, right? And it does a reasonably good job at it. And all of a sudden, now that the technologies are starting to step into these spaces where we're teaching students, to perform these machine tasks and doing it for them, they're suddenly find themselves to be obsolete when they graduate. So getting back to your point, though, if you're setting up a university program, everything is very rigid, everything's very pre-programmed, but then at the end of the program, students are already obsolete. We have a real crisis. And so we need to really go in and start reimagining that, I think.
Muchas gracias, John, por esta primera parte de la entrevista. Nos vemos en un ratito en la segunda parte.